Hello, and welcome to the Cultural Curriculum Chat podcast, where we explore the stories, systems, and human experiences shaping our classrooms, our communities, and our culture. I'm your host today, Jebeh Edmunds, educator, cultural competency consultant, and author of The Orange Blossom. And today's conversation is one of the most important we will have this season. We're going to be talking about identity, trauma, and how violence shows up in schools, not just with weapons, but through systems, neglect, and invisibility. My guest today is Dr. Bobbi Sherrod, a nationally respected scholar and practitioner whose work centers on racial trauma, urban education, and identity based violence. Dr. Sherrod is a contributor to the powerful new book, Identity Based Mass Violence in Urban Contexts Uncovered, where she shares the story of a Baltimore City Public School student named Kelly, a story that will stay with you. This is not just an academic conversation, this is a human one. And before we begin, I want to share a gentle content note. This episode will include discussion of trauma and school violence and identity based harm. So please take care of yourself as you listen and as you view on our YouTube channel. So, Dr. Bobbi, thank you so much for being here. I just want to start with you, my dear, not with the book just yet, but the theory about you. And can you tell us what led you into this work of studying identity, trauma, and violence in our urban schools?
Good morning again. And thank you so much, Jeva, for having me on here. I'm so excited. What led me to the work around identity based violence is actually um, my lifelong work as a Black girl, as a Black woman. I came into restorative justice practices over 10 years ago, actually, as a paraprofessional. I saw a lot of parallels between the restorative justice practices, also the cultural practices that I have at home and that we have throughout the African diaspora, as well as many of conflict management, conflict resolution theories and frameworks intertwined in the practice that I was learning throughout my graduate studies. My master's is in negotiations and conflict management. And so we spent a lot of time talking about global policy, global relationships, but also studying violence at an institutional level, but also at a personal level. One of the classes that really shifted my thinking around conflict and how we do conflict and how we build relationships was a class on women in war. And in particular, what was emphasized was the structural violence as it pertained to women and children of all gendered backgrounds, was the use of sexual violence, physical violence, um, not necessarily intimate partner violence, because a lot of families experience separation where it was mainly the woman or femme primary caregivers who were in charge of maintaining their safety and as well as their children. But um, seeing that violence on a global scale reminded me of the historical violences that occurred here in the United States and happen currently against Black girls and Black women. And so for me, I've always been able to see how violence is facilitated in many different institutions, and having an academic background helped expand the theories to give name to what I was experiencing, either being firsthand or secondhand.
Yeah, and I like how you shared that as well because when people think violence is only in one, avenue, just the physical or even sexual violence, but I like how you also talked about the systemic violence. How does race, gender, disability, and poverty and neighborhood intersect with the systemic violence, especially in our school system?
Mhm. They intersect multiple ways. They intersect by policy, especially we know policy is the foundation for a lot of practices. And not just at the government level either. We're looking at education policies, practices that are set by school boards, that are set by parent teacher interest groups, that are formalized through higher education practices and programs. One of the examples that I always gave, and I do give when I do restorative justice training for advocates, parents, regardless of anyone, we always talk about restorative philosophy, right? What are the thoughts that are grounded in restorative? Um, and I like to do what are the non-restorative thoughts? And so a lot of times what I do is I walk people through how we come to tell the stories we tell ourselves about one another and and about ourselves, but also what ways do we legitimize those stories in our society? And so to give an example, I always bring up for folks redlining. And redlining is a policy and practice that started in Baltimore, where Baltimore is used as a good example for redlining.
Okay.
And I ask people all the time, well, when we think about redlining, what goes into this practice of identifying what neighborhoods are more desirable versus the less desirable neighborhoods? And so folks will say the weather. They'll say the school communities around it. Some folks will
Mhm.
say, academics, and some people will say, oh, well, race, and some people will say gender. And so I'll ask them, okay, well, how does policy blend all of that together? And then we'll get into the conversation around which areas have more home ownership versus which ones have more state funded housing, or there's less home ownership. And what do the crime stats look like around there? And what does police? And so we pull into this large conversation and so by the time we're done, folks come away from that conversation understanding, okay, well, based on a person's race or how they are racialized, we have this preset story. And this preset story is then carried into so many of these spaces and these conversations with people um, who have access to power in different ways, influential, informational, financial. And then what happens is we have these policies that then are sustained, right? Along with these practices that upholds for years. And so when we go back to this redlining example and we get into, well, suddenly this neighborhood, for example, we have a neighborhood in Roland Park, which is historically known to be white and wealthy and is a part of this white L that Dr. Lawrence Brown, a professor at at Morgan State, talks about. And so in this white L, it's literally the shape of an L, and then all of the Black neighborhoods in Baltimore are shaped like a butterfly. And he talks
Interesting.
about, and so he talks about when you look at the wealth gap, even in these neighborhoods, and you see the homeowners rate is much higher. But you also have in these areas of the white L where you have a number of private schools, a number of public schools that are more funded. Why? Because homeownership in those areas are higher than in other parts of the city. So much so that people make a big fuss about their children getting into a gifted and talented program called the Ingenuity Program, just to get into this program in this one school in this neighborhood because they know that access to this program, this school community, has a significant impact on the trajectory of their children's academics. And so we talk about how kids who are in close proximity, and again, as an example, are close proximity to this ingenuity program or even to this one school in Roland Park or schools within the White L who have access to this programming. We talk about how those students who are close are in that neighborhood identified, they also have more access to resources at earlier grade levels, preparing them for that program versus the students who are within the schools around the Black butterflies. And so we
Wow.
talk about it, right? And
Yes.
so this is one of the ways that I use restorative justice practices as facilitating within a restorative circle and asking questions and asking folks using the real life examples that we use based off the policies that we endorse as the adults, as the contributing citizens of the right our society at a local level, but also at a federal level how our decisions, how our political influence plays an impact on our children, and really being able to step back and see the bigger picture, but also being able to zoom in and say, okay, well, when I pull the race thread, now I understand that the Black children in this area are less likely to be able to have access to this resource or to this program, especially if it is zip code based. Or now I understand, right? That children over here in this neighborhood, the girl children over here in this neighborhood, it seems, are more likely to be police versus the girl children in this neighborhood, and this is why. And so we were really able to sit down. I've been able to sit down with so many communities and just be able to say, okay, where is your starting point? You don't have to have the same starting point as everyone else, but where is your cutoff? Where is you all starting point? And then how do we move there? But understand that as we move through it, we have to ask the big questions around race. We have to ask the big questions around gender, around disability, around poverty, but also the culture and climate of our neighborhoods themselves. People often forget that families and neighborhoods can be institutions, or not can be, but
Yes.
are institutions.
Yes, and Dr. Bobby, just how you said, I mean, it starts from the beginning.
Mhm.
How the city planners literally designed it to be in this segregated way, and how it just like you said, pulling those threads, you can just see where the good schools are and the schools that, like you said, have less home ownership, and you can look at the data and again, the data, because I started as a parent too, love. So I'm like, yep, I'm right there with you. We do a lot of observing when we were parents, you know.
Mhm.
You also see the less experienced new green teachers that just graduated. They're in those butterfly neighborhoods,
Mhm.
and those seasoned, ready to
Mhm.
retire ones are in the L neighborhoods. And we all
Mhm.
know, and that's hard to get in. And, seniority over minority, you're like,
Yes.
okay, right?
Yes, especially
That's a
when you get
whole
into
nother,
data, just saying you look at those
yes,
retention rate of the teachers.
yes.
It's a
And how
huge indicator.
huge indicator of the retention rates, and also how you said the policing of our young African American girls and the policies, hairstyles, dress code,
Mhm.
disciplinary actions, the
Mhm.
bias of that. How kids are, pinned against each other of,
Yes.
consequences. That's a whole nother thing too. And I really want us to talk more about this Kelly in your story, in your
Mhm.
chapter,
Mhm.
because the system did fail her. What did, you know, Kelly, is fictional, but a culmination of your observations of your research, was a student in Baltimore City Public School whose story represents so many kids that fall through the cracks. I don't want to give too much away, but who was Kelly for you and why was her story so important for this book?
Mhm. Um, so Kelly for me, Kelly is myself. Kelly is a lot of Black girls that I grew up with that I'm still close friends with. Kelly, I will even say Kelly is a lot of Black women who have yet to sit down and build a safe and nurturing relationship with the angry Black girl or the angry Black woman inside of them. I am a huge advocate of the angry Black woman trope. I think that more of us should be angry and we should be able to express our displeasure and wanting more out of life and not in the soft life trad white supremacist psychosis way, but in a way that is endearing and liberating for us as well as for the people who are in part of our community. So I really want to start there and say,
Yeah.
Kelly gave myself and a lot of the Black girls and the Black women in that school community um, permission to really demand that people be better with us, um, and be kinder and be more willing to protect Black girls and Black women, quite frankly. Um, I rode so hard for Kelly because, again, just knowing my own somatic identity as a Black girl, I grew up in Baltimore, I grew up in the county part. Um, so that was one thing for me, but also I have 2 Black girls myself. One will actually be 17 in a few weeks, and then the other one, she's 10 and she'll be 11 in July. And so having my own experiences as a young Black girl in public schools, experiencing the hypervigilance, the criminalization, the sexualizing of my own body, right? All these ways that young Black girls experience misogynoir. Um, Having those experiences and then but also at the same time having adults around me of all racialized backgrounds who were willing to step in and protect me and even redirect me. And so coming into education, I always knew that that was the type of educator that I had to be, that it was important to be, especially if I wanted to make sure that the young Black girls in my life saw how important and invaluable education is. Education has always been of the utmost importance for African Americans, for all of us throughout the African diaspora. And so for me, I was like, this is my moment to be a part of that example. Um, and so in saying that, I also remembered again, like just those many of years with my own friends as we matriculated through primary schools, even into secondary, we experienced that again, like those violences, the hypersexualization through the dress code, through the hair code, tone policing. My good sister friend and colleague, who's also a restorative justice practitioner, Bilfina Yawan, did research in 2017 with Baltimore City schoolgirls, and it was titled "Why Do All the Black Girls Have an Attitude?" And one of the things that really pulled away was a lot of these black girls have an attitude because they're being hyper criminalized wherever they go, from the school building to even at home. There's always someone around like, why can't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You know better. It's so these culminating experiences are really what's boiling underneath the surface for a lot of our girls, especially when we get into the conversations where our young black boys are pitted as more important than our young black girls versus having a conversation from a black feminist standpoint that understands that all children of all gender backgrounds are necessary and important to our well-being. And when we keep young black boys in the conversation and their well-being along with young black girls, right? That is how we create a safer environment for young black girls. So we don't have to, right? So there's no trickle down economy effects of that.
Mhm.
And so in knowing all of that, Kelly's story was so important to me because Kelly in her school community was one of hundreds of black girls. It was a very large school community. But I was confident that whatever that was being done to Kelly at at a structural level or institutional level, that all of the girls in the building were feeling it, but it was just being facilitated in different ways.
Yes. Oh, and yeah, I I resonate so much because we all are Kelly,
Mhm,
and when things are not going well and speaking up and advocating for yourself and people dismissing you, minimizing it. And like you said, it takes that emotional tax, an emotional toll when you're like
mhm,
from the school building, I'm getting it from peers, I'm getting it from strangers looking at me, following me in the mall. Like there's
mhm,
no way to just breathe. You're just constantly on guard, constantly clenched, constantly
mhm.
going, you know, it's not healthy,
Right.
and the fact of why are you so upset? Why are you so angry? You'd be angry too if you spent one day in my shoes, like especially developmentally. Oh yeah, you're gonna make mistakes. Your frontal lobe isn't fully,
Mhm,
but then how come my frontal lobe should be more mature? More mature than my other peers that are the same age as me. Like you said, the over
mhm,
sexualization. Oh, she looks older than how she's supposed to be. It just, oh, yeah, it's such a poignant part of that book. Um, and again, what did Kelly need that the system wasn't providing?
mm. There are a lot of things that Kelly
Oh, yes. Oh,
was
yes.
not providing.
Still need a lot of
Um,
things. Yes.
the biggest thing, I know this will probably sound trivial to a lot of people, but it's really simple, right? The biggest thing that Kelly needed was a listening and believing ear. And that we know historically has not been afforded consistently to Black girls and Black women, especially when we get into the history of this country's sexual violence practices against Black girls and Black women. And that goes back to chattel slavery as an event of colonization.
Mhm. Oh, yep. It's so dark, but we also need to know and learn about it. So, those of you don't
Mhm,
know, do your research. Now, the trauma that the schools still carry, you gave great example of what trauma looks like. That could be misread as behavior problems or, oh, she's not so motivated.
mhm,
Can you give us a scenario for some of our teachers that are in that deficit mindset of, oh, she's a transfer kid, or, oh, her dad is incarcerated. You know how they like to quiet and whisper that kind of stuff,
mhm,
but that child is still in your classroom. So what
mhm.
does that what happens when schools don't have the resources like restorative justice training to even recognize it? What would you tell that faculty member that, they just have just lack of motivation, kind of like just kind of
Mhm.
dismissing that child before
Mhm.
letting them learn and flourish? Mhm.
Ooh, so my act fast restorative coaching is always to lead with inquiry. And so when I hear teachers make a claim and says, she just wants to be lazy, or or like the example that I talked about where I witnessed the interaction between Kelly's mom and the support staff at the school, where she said, when Kelly wants something, she puts her mind to it, and she just right, and nothing stops her. Um, in those situations, I'm always asking a question of like, tell me what that looks like. From your
Mm,
perspective, tell me what that looks like. What like, give me the clear examples. And then I like to work with them and flip that statement around. And so when they say, "Oh, she doesn't care about her future," and I'll say, "Well, let's flip that statement around. Give me evidence that she does care about her future." And sometimes they're silent. I'm like, "Okay, well, the first thing is she came to school."
that part. That part.
Right? So she
Yes,
cares.
she
And then
cares.
right, and so I'm prompting them from an asset-based place. It's a challenge, of course, right? But I'm telling them, "Show me, prove to me where this statement is right." And one of the ways where I love to see that mindset shift is when I get to that last flipping of the statement where I say instead of saying, "She doesn't care about her education," I want you to say, "I don't care about her education." And then I want you to give me examples that you don't care about her education.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. Because it feels like some faculty, not all, but
Mhm.
some just already just, we're done. Wipe
Yep.
our hands. It's September,
Mhm.
even, February right now during, Black History Month. It's like, oh, here we go. She's going to sit up a little taller. She's going to wear her
Mhm.
earrings again. And and I got to go deal with that. And now she's going to, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, she cared. She showed up. Of course she
Mhm.
cares about her future, you
Mhm.
know? But yeah, I feel like, yeah, we need more of you to keep sharing your knowledge and your expertise out there. And we'll keep talking about, what educators must understand because there's so many of them, still trying to do the work. They don't know where to go. They don't know what
Mhm.
they're doing. They have Kellys in their classroom, but they still don't know how to connect with their Kellys. So, if you could speak to them directly for a moment, what do you want them to understand about our children like Kelly? And you've gave great
Mm.
examples already, but the one that's just trying, they might not have the resources, but they're listening to you right now. What do you want
Mhm.
them to understand about their Kelly in their classroom?
I want you to understand about the Kelly in your classroom is that Kelly can be your best advocate and one of your best students with more time, with more structured attention, and more ways to create the space where Kelly can share her story, where you can advocate for Kelly and you can do the work where when Kelly is finished telling her story, you can say, "I'm so glad you told me that. Tell me what you think we should do next."
Oh, that's so important, and sometimes Kelly might had a hard weekend, just like
Mhm.
all kids, and you're just like, yeah, do you want to vent or do you need help with action? And I love your inquiry base because as educators, we are facilitators in our classroom. We
Right.
are coaching our students, How do
Mhm.
you think? And I love how you change their mindset. The staff you worked with, switch that. You don't care about Kelly's education
Mhm.
right now. That's the lie you're telling you that she doesn't care. She does
Mhm.
care. What are you doing, to make sure she isn't valued and seen in your classroom right now? And I know this book, Identity Based Mass Violence in Urban Context, it's arriving at a moment where schools are under incredible strain. I mean, I was a classroom teacher for, 18 years in primarily Title I schools. And this work is especially urgent right now in 2026 with our educators, our policymakers, and our families. And we know Kelly's story is heavy, but it's also a call to action, y'all, because
Mhm.
there is hope. So what does healing look like for our schools, Dr. Bobby, and communities that have been carrying this weight for so long? Because I do feel like
Mm,
we are at a breaking point, but I think it's a breaking point of the systems that have been
mhm,
created, you know? So it's a good
mhm.
thing to grow through the uncomfortable. But yeah, what does healing look like for our schools and communities?
Oof. So I will say, um, my response will be a mixture of my background, obviously in education,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And there was sort of justice, and also in that conflict management side. Um, and we live in a society that is facilitated by a paper that is a little over 400 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I like to think about um, conflict relationship cycles, especially right, like punitive cycles, for example. A
Yes.
lot of when we look at the dynamics of punitive relationships, they often start out from a place of you cannot manage yourself, so I can manage you for you. And
Mhm.
you go through this cycle of being managed until the lack of trust becomes apparent. Right.
Yes.
Ah, okay, I see. We're on this other side, and this is where I
Mhm.
am. And then what usually follows the lack of trust um, is some type of chaos, right? So, like some type of uprising, some type of disbanding. And so I say that to say that um, I do believe we are in a place where um, and the people being us, realize that we have more collective power than we have previously led ourselves to believe. And so I think what it will take, and a lot of people are going to be uncomfortable with my answer, and this is certainly not me advocating for it.
Yeah.
But I do think that we have to get to a place where we are physically upset about the policies that have been put in place that continue to deny our children access to resources that allows for them to improve their literacy skills as it pertains to reading, math, science, arts. Um, all of these, all of these we know which are pertinent to public health, a positive public health. Um, and so I think it will get to a place where those of us who have of the most access to power in our society, when it gets to a place where we are truly ready for something new, for a change in how we collaborate, change in how we make decisions, a change in how we do education, to be quite honest. Um,
Yeah.
I think we have to get to that point. I think
Yes.
we are slowly getting there, especially because now I'm seeing more conversations from people with people where they're saying, "Okay, voting is one part, but what else?" Especially for folks who were like, "Voting is the answer," and now I'm seeing that the conversation is voting is an answer, but we still have to show up to the board of education meetings or replay them.
Yes.
We still
Mhm.
have to encourage our friends who, even if they aren't parents or primary caregivers, to still find a way to contribute to the PTA or whatever parent teacher
Yes.
interest group that is within the school community, making sure that folks understand that if there's a school within a 5 mile radius, you are a part of the school community and your charge is more than just doling out consequences to the young people, but actually being aware of the policies at large that are being determined that no, you do not have children now, but they will affect your children 5 to 10 years when they are here. And you're like, why don't our children, why are all the, why are the big words scratched out in
Mhm.
my child's textbook? And it's
Yes.
2040. And we're like, yeah, we told you about this back in 2025
Mhm.
with that big
Yes.
project, with this dismantling of public education and the
Yes.
funding to it, or even the funding towards teacher preparation programs, or
Yes.
looking at the cost of living and adjusting educator salaries to match that.
That part.
Even understanding access to public resources for primary caregivers. One of the It's always my goal when facilitating restorative justice training with educators who are resistant by means of what about the parents, of pointing out that capitalism has you at work more with other people's children than your own. And so
Yes.
this insistence that you're a babysitter is not because the parents believe you're a babysitter, but in fact, because that's the way that our society has structured itself and has reframed education. Um,
Hard.
right. And so how do we frame it, switch this mindset so that we can have more of a collaborative teamwork effort with our parents and recognizing like the parents are being duped, but the system is duping you too. And you should be upset about that.
Uh, I love that grassroots collective, and it starts right in your local parts of your school system. Like you said, be a part of the PTA, not just for the snacks that you give, every quarter, yeah,
Yeah.
get your Costco snacks and then you just bring it in there. It's like, no, go
Mhm.
to those meetings, sit with, a family of a Kelly. You don't have to be of that cultural background, but to
Mhm.
understand there's Kellys in every single building in all of our schools in this country that would
Mhm.
need a collective village, to raise her up as well. And oh gosh, this was such a great conversation, Bobby. I would
I'm so
love.
glad to be here.
Oh, you just fill my cup of so much knowledge, and I learned so much from you, especially how Baltimore was built with that red lining. I knew red lining existed, but I didn't know that Baltimore was like one of the archetypes for that system.
Mhm.
Where can
Mhm.
we get this book, my dear, and where can people find you? Because I know my listeners and viewers are going to want you in their schools or your resources to keep this movement going.
Oh, I love to hear that so much. Well, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, like every responsible millennial is. And so you can find me there.
I love it.
And so you can find me there under Barbara Sherrod. I also have a blog. I have a new essay coming up. I took a bit of a hiatus to complete my dissertation study. And so now that that's done, yay,
Yes,
um,
you did it.
I have a lot of half-written essays in the drafts that are like, "Hello."
I got you.
They're
I
calling
got you.
from dust. But I do have the blog Millennial Mocha Moms. And so that is a space for millennial Black primary caregivers who identify as women, SAM, who would like to share their experiences where race, gender, disability, socioeconomic status, class, education, all these things where they can talk about their lived experience and how they intersect with their experiences of being Black primary caregivers and mothers. And so people can find me there. I've had folks reach out, um, and I've communicated there, built rapport with people, so you can reach me there. I'm also in the process of building out the Endarkened Circle Keeper, which is an Instagram page, and it's the Endarkened Circle Keeper if anyone would love to
Love it.
follow me there. And so that Instagram page is where I will actually be posting a visualization of how Black feminists and darkened feminist epistemology intersects and emphasizes restorative justice principles, philosophies, and practices.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Barbara, it's just amazing to chat with you. And folks, if I will have all of her information in the show notes so you can continue to go along with this journey with her and share her resources with your educators and families, primary caregivers, all of you will have access to all of her information in the show notes. And if this episode moved you, I have two calls for action for y'all. First, visit jebahedmunds.com to explore culturally responsive classroom resource guides and lesson plans, tools to help our educators build safer, more affirming learning spaces. And again, follow and join my Inclusive Educator newsletter, where I share insights and updates and strategies navigating race, identity, and education with clarity and courage. Dr. Bobby, it was such a pleasure talking with you today, and I know you are gonna be in my community a lot longer, and I'm
Yes.
so
Oh, we're
excited we
connected for
met.
good
We are
now.
so connecting. We are in. I am so excited. And listeners, thank you for holding space for our conversations that matter. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep building a world where every Kelly belongs. Thank you.